Hi, Marty. How are you? Very good evening from Sri Lanka. Welcome.
Hey, Asanga. It's good to see you again. Good morning from Charleston, West Virginia.
Hi. Good morning, Martin. Nice to meet you for the first time. I'm Ravi Jayardhan. Looking forward to this session. Yeah.
Great.
Ravi and I share the global marketing lectures in Colombo, Marty.
Great. Well, I hope you've had a good summer term.
Of course, yeah. Without fuel, yes.
Good.
Ravi, we can start.
Yeah. Okay. So, Martin, thank you very much with your busy schedule joining with us. So, our audience is all the MBA students, global marketing students. So, I'll just take about 3 to 5 minutes just to give an importance of why global marketing is important in today's Sri Lankan context. As you know, it's a very probably in Sri Lankan history one of the toughest time we are going through, mainly for forex. Right, you would have seen it on newspapers and things like that. So. That's for the students' point of view. The key objective of mine is to explain in the next 3 to 5 minutes why global marketing is important, and especially in today's context, and especially for Sri Lanka. Now, if you take our business landscape, country needs dollars, and that has the entire last 6 to 9 months in terms of inflation going up 50% plus, all negative stuff for the normal people has happened due to this forex crunch. And now if you take global marketing has a direct correlation. Now, why the government is strongly saying people to do exports, because that's one of the things is within our control. There are a lot of factors I'm not going to touch here, which is beyond our control, the fiscal policies, which is actually handled by the policymakers. Now, as a marketing student, how you can contribute to the national situation and for your country is that in today's context is that to enhance our sales primarily across different geographical boundaries. That is where global marketing will be very handy. But unfortunately, if you go back at what is happening right now, especially the last 5 to 10 years, Sri Lankan's mindset is mainly for trading. A good example is from our total manufacturing. Sri Lanka is number one in the world, and 95% of our total gross production is exported. But out of that 95, only very few brands like Dilma is by far the number one who conquer the world. The other is just only trading operation. There is hardly any marketing. It's a bit of a supply chain dynamic. We send it to a country, they put their own brand and sell. So what is the value gain to the country is sometimes it's not even 50%. If you sell it for 50, they sell it at 100, 120. So somebody else is earning the money. And this is happening across, I just took tea as an example, across categories, because we have a trading mindset against a marketing mindset. Right now, this is where this global marketing could be very handy, because our overall value, understanding the consumer, how to use the marketing mix, segmentation, when you go through a scientific methodology, you immediately add value to your organization, add value to the country as a whole. So this is where I don't think in Sri Lankan history, global marketing has come so important as of today. No doubt about it. Now, I'll tell you my company, we are a $200 million company. We export about 7 to 10% of our production to 50 countries. England is our biggest market. But we were having a discussion, only 2-3 countries we do real marketing activities. The balance is just a trading. Now, we are also changing that mindset. And now we think, okay, the best way to get a better forex, better sales is to establish our brand. So that is where the global marketing comes into play. And I have done it in England to some extent, and I've selected African country and Asian country, and we have started, and we are reaping the harvest. We are reaping the harvest because people buy brands instead of products. So that is something the people, the marketing fraternity in Sri Lanka should really understand. That is where, Martin, where students learning global marketing, practicing it today will be absolutely useful. Now take United States of America. Why US is one of the most powerful countries? If you do a Google search, out of best 100 brands, about 60 brands are from US. And they have done it. And as a result, they are economically very powerful, right? So it is the brand game. Now, India has come very handy. They have developed some global brands. Korea has come. So this some countries from this part of the world, from Asia, also from a very basic exporting and things like that and trading, is now building brands. Some are regional brands, some are global brands. So this is what I want to tell you just as a synopsis. It's a need of the hour. And the global marketing students, since they are at MBA at middle to senior management level, has an immense responsibility learning this subject and practicing it, or even if you're not in the marketing department, help the organization for some new different thinking platform, because this will help the not only the company, but this will definitely help the country as a whole, right? So that's what I just want to tell you. Thank you very much. And of course, I don't want to take much time. Asanga will take it over from here, my good friend, and then Martin will definitely elaborate, and then probably we'll have a question and answer session. Yeah, over to you, Asanga.
Thank you, Ravi. That was a fantastic overview and opening remarks. So, guys, very quickly, if I am to introduce Dr. Martin Roth, is the current president of University of Charleston. Before coming to West Virginia, he was the dean of the Barney School of Business, University of Hartford. He was previously the chair of the Sonoco International Business Department, executive director of the flagship International MBA, and chief innovation and assessment officer of the University of South Carolina. With lots of experience, Martin's teaching and research expertise in strategy, management, and marketing. He had won numerous accolades. He had taught in many schools. And on top of that, his research has been published in leading marketing and management journals, including HBR, Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of International Business, and the list goes on, and even in the Wall Street Journal. His doctorate, MBA, BA degrees are from University of Pittsburgh. Before entering higher education, Marty worked in market research and retailing. He serves on the board of directors of the American Red Cross and Charleston Area Alliance, and many more. Marty is no stranger to us. He's a co-author of the country manager simulation that we use in our class. And it's an absolute honor, Marty, to have you talking to our students today. And we are very privileged, and we would like to welcome you to give your speech to the PIM MBA in Sri Lanka.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. It's great to be back with you and have an opportunity to just share a little bit of my thinking on the continued increased importance of global marketing in the world today, and to certainly have an opportunity to have some question and answers session during our time together today. So, as Asanga mentioned, I'm the co-author of the Country Manager Simulation Game, and this was kind of born out of my own teaching activities when I was starting out being a marketing professor. At the time, I was at Boston College, and I was kind of frustrated with the types of teaching resources that were available. There were some really good textbooks, but I thought they were pretty theoretical and a bit far removed from the types of activities that managers need to engage in order to help their companies expand successfully internationally. So I began working with a colleague, and we connected with the software company called Interpretive Software that is ultimately designed and published Country Manager. So it's been in the market now for 20 plus years. I believe it's the most used international marketing simulation game in the world today. And we typically have it being used in about 140 different schools worldwide. So I just got done teaching a summer course here with our MBA students at the University of Charleston, and we use Country Manager in that experience as well. So it's a good opportunity for me to make sure I'm keeping current with my students here and making sure the Country Manager continues to be a relevant learning experience. You know, one of the things that's kind of pretty fascinating, if you go back 10 or 20 years ago, most companies had a slow progression from being a local company and then they would progress to being a national company. Then maybe they would begin expanding a bit internationally, and typically close to home, become a regional company. And then if they continue down that path of success, they would be a global company. And now what we're finding is the timeline of that progression is really shrinking. And oftentimes you have companies that we refer to as being born global. As soon as they launch, they're looking to serve customers around the world, regardless of national borders. Now, of course, that's a more complicated endeavor because there are a lot of complexities of doing business across different countries. But nonetheless, the internet has made it so much easier for organizations to connect with suppliers and partners and customers around the world, regardless of their location. We're in a kind of global economy where every year there's a little bit more and more of a shift towards services being the driver of GDP, as opposed to manufactured goods, and services are much easier to export, if you will, or to sell and distribute internationally. So you take a classic consumer packaged goods company like a Procter & Gamble, a Colgate-Palmolive, types of companies that All Star Brands is modeled after. And those are companies that have been around a very long time, and over the years, they have become increasingly international until they reached a point where over half of their sales were from outside of the United States, and that ratio continues to grow. But that happened over a course of decades, where they would enter into one country, say in the Asia Pacific region. They might expand into Indonesia, and then go to the Philippines, and then expand further east towards South Korea or Japan, and so forth. Now you look at companies like PayPal, which does e-commerce payment systems. They're already a relatively young company, 10 or 20 years old, and they're already in 50 plus markets. And their only limitation is really kind of regulatory issues in a particular market around kind of payment processes and systems. So the world is continuing to rapidly change, and what that's requiring is an increasing mindset and an increasing set of skills and capabilities to be able to do business in multiple places around the world, do it quickly, do it effectively, and do it in a way that's going to drive profitability and sustainability for the organization. So one of the things that was interesting when Ravi was talking is, marketing is marketing. There's some key fundamentals, which I know were part of your course that you've been taking, and are very tightly integrated into the country manager experience. It begins with kind of analyzing what we refer to as the 5 C's, really understanding your customer, understanding competitors, understanding potential collaborators, such as your partners in the distribution channel, understanding your company's core competencies, and finally, understanding context. What is different about those other C's: customers, competitors, channel partners, your company's strengths and weaknesses, as you analyze them moving into different country settings. And so and understanding and analyzing those 5 C's is what helps an organization kind of create the value equation, which will ultimately be part of their go-to-market strategy. How is the market segmented? Which of those segments of customers do we want to target? How do we want to position our brand in the marketplace in a way that's going to be differentiated, so that we're able to extract as much profitability as possible, and customers are willing to pay as much as possible for the brand that we're bringing to market. And Ravi made a great point. Customers don't buy products, they buy brands. Products are commodities. Brands are what are the kind of the differentiated products, the unique products, the products that are worth more or worth less in a competitive market. And the way we try to convey the relevance of our brand is through managing that marketing mix, how we're going to structure the product and service offering, and what channels of distribution we're going to make it available, how we're going to manage the push and the pull marketing strategies like advertising and promotion and sales force activities, and ultimately the pricing, which will, in the customer's mind, help to position our product relative to other options that they see that they may want to consider in the marketplace. So I think it's really important to remember that these key concepts around segmentation, targeting, positioning, the marketing mix are robust wherever you're going to do business. What's unique is how is the market structured in terms of the competitors that are available, the choices that customers have in different markets, the preferences that customers have for different product features, and the degree of price sensitivity and the preferences about how they like to shop or secure products if we're looking more at a business-to-business context. And I think that's one of the things that we've tried to incorporate and keep up to date and relevant in Country Manager, is giving you access to all of that market data. So every year in every country, you can analyze the consumer research and look at how customers make decisions about which products they prefer and ultimately are going to select in a highly competitive market. Where do they like to shop? How price sensitive are they? What is their level of awareness, and what brands are they purchasing? And then having a lot of competitive information to really get at the why. Why do customers who prefer a kid's toothpaste, why are they buying from a brand that doesn't even offer kids? How does that happen? Well, there's got to be a reason. You know, customers, just like you as customers, have some logic as to why you behave, why you buy the products that you do. So kind of understanding what's going on in that marketplace ultimately helps you to identify what are the opportunities, what are the gaps between what customers want and what competitors are offering in the marketplace that are, in a sense, forcing customers to make suboptimal buying decisions. They're buying something they really don't want because those are the brands that are available where they shop, or those are the brands that they're aware of due to the advertising that the different competitors are doing in the marketplace. So when we can identify those gaps between what customers really want and what's available in the marketplace, those are the sweet spots or the low-hanging fruit where we can try to enter into a market as a new competitor. People don't know who we are, but when we can go into that market and address a need that's not being well addressed by competition, that's a real opportunity for us to go in and to capture some immediate and decisive market share, begin to raise brand awareness, begin to develop those channel relationships, and give us those advantages, which will enable us to take on competitors more directly when we want to try to start offering the same types of products that they do. And it's going to be a little bit more challenging to convince the customer about how our product is unique and differentiated in the marketplace. And one of the things that we wasn't in Country Manager originally, but we ultimately created was the Brand Equity Index, with which you've become very familiar. And we know how important brands are, and we wanted to put forward a set of metrics that would help you understand the extent to which your brand is kind of gaining momentum in a marketplace, and how once your brand is well established and well respected in the marketplace, that enables you to start modifying your marketing strategy in a way to try to extract more value out of the marketplace. For example, when you started to see your brand equity index in a particular country get up into the 70s or maybe even into the 80s, that was a signal that customers are going to be looking for your brand. The retailers want to put your brand on the shelf because they know customers are going to come in and look for it. So when you know that there's this demand all the way through the channel, what does that enable you to do? Well, that enables you to start commanding a higher price. So you might have been price positioning right around or maybe a little bit lower than some of the multinational competitors. When you see that brand equity score go up, that means you can start pricing your product higher relative to the competitors than you had before. Similarly, when you entered into the market, you're probably really laser focused on how can I convince retailers to stock my product in the store. So I'm going to offer them a really attractive allowance, maybe give a 10 or 12% discount off of my invoice price to give them an economic incentive to put my products on the shelf. Well, again, now that your brand equity index is at 70 or 80, those retailers don't need the same incentive because they know customers are going to be coming into their store to buy your product. You're pricing it more aggressively, which gives you more margin, but guess what? It gives them more margin as well. So you can begin reducing that allowance. So that's why we built the brand equity index, because again, we know that's what customers want to buy. They want to buy brands. So we need to know how strong our brand is, both in an absolute sense, but also in a relative sense. How is our brand progressing in terms of its strength over time? And how can we leverage that and look at those measures as a trigger for how we can start to make some changes to our marketing strategy, which ultimately are going to help us kind of shift from kind of a growth stage of capturing market share to a profitability stage of increasing our net contribution. So those are some of the things that, hopefully you've experienced in the game, or you've been able to reflect on as you kind of go through the year-to-year decision making. And it gets complicated. The more countries you enter, the more work there is, and your team has to divide and conquer and figure out how to manage these international processes together. But when you do have a chance to kind of step back and reflect on what's been happening or the end results of your game, hopefully those are some of the things that you'll kind of think about and take forward with you when you have the opportunity to help an organization manage its international and global activities. Another thing that I want to point out is, what the game does is it really focuses on what we call the external factors which lead to a company being successful in their international activities. What I mean by external factors is your customers are not within your company's walls. Your channel partners are not within your company's walls. Your competitors are certainly not within your company's walls. So a lot of those kind of 5 C's that I mentioned, 4 of them are external to your organization. And that's a lot of the data that you are drilling into to really understand how the market's operated and what decisions were going to be most successful, and then looking at the results and figuring out how you could modify your decisions to be even more successful in the countries where you were doing business in the following year. So you're looking at the customer research, you're looking at the competitive information, you're looking at kind of economic forecasts, how much is the economy expected to grow and what's the anticipated inflation rate. All those different factors which are so important in figuring out that strategy value equation. But that other C about your company and your company's strengths and weaknesses and its core competencies, capabilities, those are critically important. And that's part of what you kind of learn by doing in playing country manager. Is your team had to coalesce and come together and figure out how to divide and allocate responsibilities, how to manage your time, how to share information, so that ultimately your team was making the best decisions that it thought would give your team the best results. So some interesting research has found that these internal capabilities of companies have a really dramatic impact on the extent to which those companies are successful in international expansion activities. So I'm going to share my screen just for a moment. and share a little bit about an article that I wrote a few years ago. Let me pull it up here. 1 second. There we go. This is an article that was published in the Harvard Business Review in 2016 called, "Does Your Company Have What It Takes to Go Global?" And this was a project that I worked on with some colleagues from a couple of other business schools here in the States. And we're all very passionate about international business and have different corporate experiences, as well as a lot of experience doing research and teaching on global business. And what we did is we surveyed 300 managers at companies around the world. And to qualify to participate in the survey, their companies had to have launched an international expansion initiative in the last 2 years. And we asked those managers to tell us how successful that international expansion initiative has been. And we divided the sample of companies into those who had had successful expansion activities and those whose activities, unfortunately, had not been successful in terms of meeting their objectives in terms of sales and profitability and market share and so forth. And then what we did is we asked those managers to answer a number of questions so we could try to find out the relationship between the internal capabilities within those companies of the ones that were successful and how those capabilities compared to the ones that were unsuccessful. And could we identify any gaps that would indicate if companies tend to have certain capabilities, they're much more likely to be successful when they expand internationally. So I'm going to fast forward here to an exhibit which shows the percentage of respondents from winning companies. So the bars in blue are from the companies that were meeting their performance goals for the international expansion activities, compared to the losing firms, the ones that you see the bars are in gray. And this indicates the extent to which the responding manager said, my company is kind of good at the following. And what we end up calling these were the 7 TUDES, T-U-D-E-S. And so, for example, starting on the left, does your company have the right attitude for international expansion? Does it prioritize global business expansion as an important strategic priority for the company? The companies that were successful had almost a 2-to-1 difference in how important global expansion was at the corporate level compared to the companies that were less successful. The second TUDE was aptitude, that the company has the right knowledge and skills to succeed abroad. Again, over a 2-to-1 difference of the companies that were successful expanding internationally compared to those that weren't. So think about what you've been learning in your course. What are the knowledge and skills needed to succeed abroad? Understanding customers, understanding competition, understanding the market dynamics. All those different things are really important to really be successful, to have that right aptitude that's going to help you and your company be successful. The next one was magnitude. It aligns the scale and the scope of the overseas opportunity with its goals and capabilities. So one of the things that's really interesting for a lot of firms is an international expansion opportunity is seen as much smaller in magnitude than the company's core business in its domestic market. Sri Lanka, that may be a bit different, because if you start to look at expanding into the UK or the United States or into the other major countries in Europe or Asia, those economies are significantly larger than Sri Lankan economy. So making sure that the company's sense of the scope of the overseas activities is really important. Because if the mindset is, well, it's just an international expansion, it's really not that important in the grand scheme of things, how much resources are going to be allocated? Not a lot. But if we really recognize that the potential scale and scope of that international opportunity can be a game changer for our organization, may be willing to allocate more resources because of the magnitude of that effort. And again, successful companies understand magnitude much more so than those that are not. The next tude is latitude. The company is able to adapt its marketing policies and practices to the opportunity. This is right smack in the wheelhouse of country manager. So of course you want to try to standardize certain things that kind of give you leverage, things you're doing well in one country that you want to extrapolate into another, but you also recognize that there were market opportunities present in one country that weren't in another. So adapting your marketing program and your practices to what's unique about the country opportunity, exercising that latitude is another ingredient in that formula for success. The next tude is called rectitude. Legal and ethical practices allow for overseas flexibility while maintaining corporate compliance. This is also often tricky for a lot of organizations. They're very comfortable with and familiar with the legal and the regulatory practices in their home market, and not often very comfortable operating in environments where those policies and practices may be different. But that's part and parcel of the challenge of doing business internationally, is not necessarily thinking that every country operates like it does at home, but countries operate differently given the legacies of their legal and regulatory systems, their orientation toward commerce, cultural differences, and so forth. The next tude, which again had a very big gap between the winners and the losers, is called exactitude. The corporate culture tolerates some financial ambiguity and market uncertainty. We kind of give you a lot of rope in country manager. One of the things that you may have been asking your professors was, can I spend as much as I want to build a plant? Can I launch as many advertising campaigns as I want? Is there really no budgeting limit? Is there no inherent cost of capital that I have to kind of borrow money to do these things? And we intentionally didn't want to have you have to wrestle with those financial challenges, but those are real financial challenges that you're going to face when you're helping an actual company kind of manage its activities, and certainly manage those activities in an international context. And one of the things that you probably found was, there's significant magnitude differences in the countries that you entered, and the larger companies required significantly more investment. So knowing that there's going to be some financial ambiguity and market uncertainty is important. Otherwise, your mindset would be, we're only going to spend the same amount in each country that we enter. We're not willing to undertake the financial ambiguity that's tied to market uncertainty. But in fact, companies that are more successful internationally understand the financial dynamics, but they tend to be more willing to take on a little bit more financial risk than companies that are a bit more conservative and less likely to do so. And then the final tude is called fortitude, that the company is committed to global initiatives, even in the face of setbacks. And you surely experienced this. You surely entered into new countries and found, wow, we didn't capture as much market share as we hoped. We weren't as profitable as we would have liked. We haven't been able to kind of quite figure out how to successfully challenge some of the other brands like Driscoll and Eversmile. That's okay. You didn't have your professors looking over your shoulder and said, you weren't successful in the first 2 years in that country. You need to get out. They said, no, stay in it. Figure out what have been your challenges. What have been the things that haven't worked as well as you would have hoped? And those challenges become your opportunities of how to be better next year. So having that fortitude that you're committed to being successful internationally, you really want to stay in the game, is another factor that was much more pronounced in companies that were successful doing business internationally compared to those that weren't. So hopefully, as you kind of reflect back on all the things that you learned in your course, you can see how you've developed an appreciation and hopefully some skill sets in these different aspects of the 7 TUDES, which play a dramatic role, those kind of internal factors around corporate capabilities and corporate culture, which help certain companies be more successful internationally than others. So those are some things I wanted to share with you this morning. And I would love the opportunity to have a conversation with you and try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Marty. That's very insightful and gave us lots of new dimensions to think about. Without me talking, I'll open the floor now to our participants. If there are questions, you can please ask. First, tell your name, introduce yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Roth. My name is Archana.
Archana, would you like to switch on your camera if you can?
Yes, sure. Maybe, oh, hang on. I seem to have a old background on me. But yeah. Right. Okay, so my question was kind of in relation to the country manager simulation. And it is, are things like demographic shift covered in the simulation? So for example, if you take the Philippines, they have a fairly high percentage of population in poverty, but then it also has things like a high GDP growth and a population growth, which is slightly smaller than that, which means over time, there's a chance that the amount of people in poverty will be shifting downwards. And as part of that, let's say in the simulation, you entered into Philippines with a, let's say, a cost-effective toothpaste and a more medium-priced toothpaste. Would there be cases of like brand loyalty, where people who purchased your cost-effective toothpaste recently or in the past have now essentially shifted up in terms of economic class, and now due to brand loyalty, do they move into the higher tier?
Great, great question. So what we try to do with the game, we have 2 different versions. We have the version in Asia, which you played. We also have a Latin American version. So about every 2 years, we make sure we go in and update the demographic data. So pull from the World Bank data, up-to-date population data. We make sure we're modeling the kind of economic growth, GDP growth, inflationary trends, and so on and so forth. So we're trying to keep the narrative of the countries as close as we can to kind of what's happening in the world today. What we model more independently is the nature of competition, because we want, in some markets, and consumer packaged goods are one of them, over time, certain global companies become more and more dominant in every country. And so that kind of takes the fun out of it in a way. And, part of the learning experience is, identifying those market opportunities against, again, what the customers want versus what they have available to them in the marketplace. So, and we also want to make sure that, certain markets have different challenges than others. So in whatever, version of the game you're playing, there are some countries which are just markedly larger than others in terms of population and overall toothpaste sales. And there's other markets which are kind of middle size, small size, and some that are more competitive, less competitive than others. With regard to the question about, how did those demographic shifts perhaps correlate with kind of brand loyalty? Yeah, absolutely. And that, again, is the power of that brand equity index, that the more that you're entrenched in the marketplace, the more successful investment that you've made in building out your distribution, gaining awareness, having a differentiated product that is kind of logically priced. So the things that your larger sizes are priced higher than your smaller sizes. Your higher value added products like your whitening and your healthy SKUs are priced higher than your economy SKUs. When you're doing all those things right, then that gives you the opportunity to really start winning the hearts and minds of customers, and they're more willing to stay with you. And again, that's why that, the opportunity to, increase your prices and decrease your allowances and not lose market share turns into increased profitability. So those are some of the things that, we want to make sure that you're able to kind of see those things happen in real time and start to kind of develop an appreciation for how customer preferences, not only what they are when you enter into a market, but in a way, how you can ultimately shape those customer preferences by doing high quality marketing work. And that's what ultimately leads to those concepts like, brand loyalty and being able to position your brand in a kind of more kind of value added way, not value in terms of lower price, but value in terms of customers appreciating what makes your brand unique and being willing to pay a premium for it.
Right, I see. Thank you very much. I do have a bit of a follow-up question in relation to that. So this is kind of related to simulation and kind of related to the general aspects of marketing as well. It is the idea of adaptability versus recognizability. So it's sort of what you mentioned of a brand should chase any opportunities that it sees in the market, but would doing so sort of damage its brand? So as an example, I can give maybe like McDonald's. I believe in America, it might be considered a cheaper fast food option, while in Sri Lanka, it's considered more a food that the middle to upper middle class might go after. And so it might be positioned somewhat differently in different countries. So would doing that sort of a thing kind of damage the brand's overall positioning?
Yeah, that's another good question. And again, that's why we talk about those 5 C's. Context is so important, and why understanding the nature of competition in a market is so critical. So in a Western market like the United States, the customers typically in larger population centers, have lots of choices. And so the McDonald's experience gets compared to other kind of family styled but convenience oriented restaurants, where you can dine in, but you can also do drive through and, relatively lower price points. In other markets, like you mentioned, McDonald's might be perceived a little bit more of an upscale brand. So it's all relative to the market. And I think in the end of the day, what McDonald's wants to do is it wants to be seen as a high quality, high service level, very consistent experience brand wherever it does business. Those are the things that it wants to kind of standardize about its brand. It's not necessarily that it offers one menu item and it offers that menu item everywhere that it does business, or that its absolute price points are the same everywhere it does business. But relative to its competitors, this is how it wants to be positioned, based on a foundation of high quality, excellent service, consistency, of the customer experience.
All right. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's a very good question, Archana. Very, very good question. Any other questions very quickly? Anyone else quickly wants to ask a question?
Hi, Dr. Roth, Angelo here. I have a question with regard to entering a particular specific area, now a region actually. So since we are playing in the game that we are playing, we are focusing on the Asian region. So we have 2 large markets, which are India and China. And then the rest of the markets are more or less smaller than those 2 markets. So like you said, if I'm not mistaken, there are no budget we are not going to take into consideration the financial impacts as to how much we can spend and how much on the production facility and then on marketing expenses. My question to you is, when entering a certain region, like, is it riskier to go to a bigger country like India or China, or like, is it a must to go to one of those, or do you go to a smaller country and then establish yourself and then go and try to capture the other markets over the years?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. And of course, there's no right or wrong answer to that. It really depends on what are the company's goals and objectives. So if you kind of think about it, how were each of your teams in the game compared to one another? Well, you probably were compared in terms of your market share and your cumulative net contribution, maybe your brand equity and so forth. So if you're being compared on how well you're doing across the entire region, and market share is a performance objective, well, you're not going to win if you only enter the small countries, right? Because you might get 50% share of Thailand and the Philippines, but you're still not going to have as much Asian market share as if you got 20% of China, right? So it depends on, what are your company's objectives? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And that helps to define which markets are more attractive than others. So one of the co-authors on the article that I shared with you, he used to work in the global tool business. And I was, helping, him and his organization analyze various markets around the world for international expansion. And in Latin America, the only market that really made sense for them was Brazil, because it was like China is in Asia. It is so much larger than any other country, and the dynamics of their business and the type of exporting that they would have to do and the type of channel relationships they would have to build. He said, unless we can send an entire container ship of tools, we're really not going to make money. And it would take us 2 or 3 years to sell an entire container ship of tools in Chile, but we can probably sell 2 or 3 container ships of tools per year in Brazil. So the scale of Brazil de facto was the most attractive market for that company. So it really kind of depends on the dynamics of the company, what it is you're selling and what kind of economics underlie it. What are the performance objectives of the organization? And it's really fascinating as different groups play country manager. When you have, say, 7 or 8 or maybe 10-week class, it's possible to enter into every market within the game. The class that I teach only meets for 7 weeks. It takes the first week to kind of get started. We have a kind of a week where you need to wrap things up. So it's really not possible to expect students to be able to enter into all the markets. We say, okay, you have to enter in a minimum of 3. Well, if you don't enter some of those big markets early, you're just not going to win the game relative to the rest of the class, because you've entered small markets. And it doesn't mean that you can't be really profitable in those smaller markets. But if we're measuring everybody on regional performance, scale matters. So great question. And I think you just have to keep in mind, what is it that you and your organization are trying to accomplish? Make sure everybody's in agreement. So a year or 2 down the line, somebody's not saying, well, our profit margins on a per unit basis aren't very high in India or in China. We probably would have had higher margins per unit if we had gone to Thailand or the Philippines. Well, that's true, but is that what our goal? Was our goal per unit margin, or was our goal how much of that currency we were able to repatriate back into Sri Lanka? If that's the objective, China was probably the best place to go.
Understood, sir. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
Very good question. Anyone else?
Good morning, sir.
Chamikara, will you wait for Nilushika and then go?
No problem, sir.
Yeah, Nilushika, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, sir. Good morning. It was actually a bit of a follow-up question to what Angelo asked. My name is Nilushika. I do understand it all depends on the context when you decide to go to a region. But I was also thinking, okay, assume you decide you want to go with economies of scale. So you would go to a place like China or India. But I wonder, because you're looking at, I mean, the geographical area of these countries are huge. So you're looking at penetrating a huge market. But I wondered if then it would make sense to just go to a region of that region. But I wonder then, would there be an issue in terms of the market share that you capitalize on? So would that be a good way to decide and go forward? If you could maybe give us some advice on that.
Sure. I mean, that's a really great question as well. So when you look at a big country, like India, like China, you can go into, one of those markets and target, one or two major cities or, one major region. And that would be just a great place to start to develop, your channel relationships, figure out the nuances of doing business in that country, and then figure out how can we expand into other regions where we can kind of leverage some of those channel relationships, become a little bit more skilled and adept at how we're going to, build brand awareness and manage our pricing and so forth. So just as when you enter China, typically what you did is you said, okay, we're going to go in first and we're going to target families with kids and younger customers with white toothpaste. And then each year we're going to expand more segments. Well, we can also think about geographic segments, right? So we can say we're going to go into China and first we're going to go to Beijing and then Shanghai. And then once we kind of establish our presence there, we'll go into Wuhan and we'll start to go into, other cities and other regions. So that notion of expanding geographically within a country is very, very important as well, the larger the country is. Now, if we're thinking about a really small country, there's probably one or two major metropolitan areas which are going to account for the majority of the volume of the consumer goods and the purchasing power. So it's a bit less complicated. But you're absolutely right. In the larger countries, you're probably not going to be able to go in and try to, offer your product, especially if it's a physical good that, requires, distribution, to offer it in every viable market. You're going to have to prioritize them and then look to expand as you go.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Lovely. Tamikara, now you can go.
Good morning, Professor. Good morning, Doctor. I think, first of all, thank you very much for coming up with the country simulator, which has really helped us to understand the knowledge and the experience shared by Asanga. So thank you very much on that. So my question is about, I would like to get your opinion on this. So whenever we get into a country, since we are a global multinational, our tendency and our comfortable place is to copy whatever the other multinationals are doing. Okay, we want to be in the segments. We want to maybe match those price points as well. What my question is, what if we move to a segment where a regional player or a local player is dominating, and how should we think about that, sir?
Yeah, that's another fantastic question. So I think that's one of the kind of the big challenges that a lot of students face is kind of recognizing who we're competing against. And this gets back to that McDonald's question. Who are we really competing against? So contesting against the United States, McDonald's is primarily competing against, Burger King and Wendy's with similar types of menus, but they're also competing price points with, Taco Bell or Pizza Hut. Those are the types of family style restaurants that they're competing against. So when you think about pricing, that's where you have to kind of think about as customers are looking at how much they're expecting to spend, for a lunch or to take their family to dinner. Well, typically the local and the regional competitors in most markets typically aren't as strong and adept at brand building. So there are legacy companies that have been around a long time based on fulfilling a very functional need within that product category. But they're not usually as strong at having a diversified product line. They're not as strong around targeting and positioning. They're not as strong around brand building. So what that means is when you enter into a market, you're trying to really compete more like a multinational than you are with a local or regional. And pricing your product like the locals and regionals is typically not going to generate enough revenue to support all the marketing activities that you want to do like the other multinationals do. So that's one of the things that's kind of a little tricky to learn early on is, one of the things I'd love to look at each year is the pricing graph in each country. So it's just taking the average prices across all the SKUs that the companies offer. So, you're looking at averages, not individuals, but it's a great way of showing how the brands are positioned on price in each country. And what you really want to do as All Smile brand is you want to be clustered within the multinationals. You don't want to have your price positioning be compressed down with the locals and the regionals, because you're just never going to generate enough gross margin to perhaps cover your production and distribution costs, let alone have anything left over to cover your marketing costs. So you really need to be positioned higher up within the multinationals, and then where within the multinationals you are is going to depend on how unique your product is and how strong your brand is. So if you go into a market and you're offering products that aren't available and you're advertising them in ways that customers are now going to have products available to them they never had available to them before, you can actually go into that market early on and price at the high end of the multinationals. But if you go into a more mature market and you're going to have to spend some time and some investment in generating brand awareness and gaining distribution access, you might want to price down in the lower end of the multinationals. And then as you build that awareness, build distribution, grow your brand equity, then you increasingly are moving your price positioning to the higher end of the multinationals. And the thing that makes that even a little more complicated is recognizing that in most markets, there's inflation every year. So all things equal, ceteris paribus, most companies are going to be increasing their prices the rate of inflation. So if you're currently here, but you really want to be price positioned here relative to the competition, what is that going to require if inflation means that the competition is going to be up here next year? That means your pricing really needs to go from all the way down here all the way up to this level. So some of those price adjustments you need to make might look really large, but you're analyzing things on a year basis. You only get to change them once a year. In a real life setting, you could be changing your prices every month and make more gradual price changes. But that's a game. So the limitation and how frequently you're going to have time to make decisions. So don't be afraid to make some significant price adjustments based on the good work that you're doing, building up your brand, as well as recognizing inflation in the market. So I hope that helps to answer your question.
Thank you very much, sir. Fabulous insights. Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much. I think that's all we have. I booked only 1 hour of Marty's time. So we almost 1 hour now. And thank you very much, Marty, for those insights. And this is the 3rd year running that we are using your simulation. And there's a lot of response, very positive response from our learning partners, not only here as well as in other countries where we run the MBA. So thank you very much for joining us, and we certainly enjoyed every minute of this 1 hour, and hopefully we can have you again next time as well. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a lot of fun to engage with you, and I'm glad you're having such a great experience with the game, and don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of assistance.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doctor.
So thank you very much, everybody. Today's advertising lecture, I'm afraid it's you'll have to have a look at the recording, which I did last week. Next Tuesday, weekday group, we will meet for the summary session, and weekend group on Saturday, normal time. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, sir. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, sir.